Well, welcome back to the X Podcast. I am here with original co-founder, or actually founder, and guest favorite Kevin Illich, and new guest favorite, Dionna Carter. How are y'all?
I'm great.
Doing great.
Excited to be here.
What did you do this weekend?
This weekend, who knows? How many days ago was that?
Oh,
It's Wednesday. One big party at one church was this past
nice.
weekend.
What was that?
So it's our annual event that we do. We make it a big thing at church. Essentially, the world parties to forget. We party to remember.
Love that.
And so
Come
Pastor
on.
Greg is very much about, we don't have less of a reason to party now that we're in faith. We
Yeah.
have more of a reason to party.
on.
And so we party. And then we did beach baptisms at Alum Creek.
Why do I
So-
already feel like you should be doing this podcast?
No.
Top that, Kevin. What did you do this weekend?
Well, I cleaned my bathroom,
Yeah.
so
Good
no
job.
kidding. No, it's
Anything? Anything worth?
dude. I'm just happy to be here again
Yeah.
with you guys.
Yeah.
And this is my first time meeting Dionna, so it's
Yeah.
great to finally be at the same table with you. And Russ, how you survived a car wreck?
Oh yeah. So I was T-boned 2 nights ago. Yeah. Hey, I haven't told my parents, so mom, dad, if you're listening, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I was coming back from Easton, my nightly routine. I was at Bryce Road, 4-way stop sign, and when it was my turn, I went, and a car just zoomed. I honked,
day.
tried to swerve, but just hit me so hard on passenger side, and then kept going, and just sped away.
And you have short-term memory loss now, don't you? That's what you were telling me.
What did you just say?
Yeah, about the
Yeah.
brain
Well
damage.
played. Yes, it was almost playing.
Oh my gosh.
And so Kevin's dad is amazing for a lot of reasons, but he works at Buckeye Nissan, and so we're just praying and scheming like, Lord, are you saying something? Is an Aria in the future? We don't know, but
Wow.
if you want to invest in Russ Moore Car Ministries, we're taking Venmo. Anyways, who is Dionna? So we met a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Really talking through outreach. So one of our outreach partners, we do, correct me if I get the name wrong, Christmas Foster Outreach.
Close enough.
Okay.
Foster Teen Christmas Outreach.
Have I ever gotten it right?
I don't know.
Okay, I don't think so. And it's something all over the state of Ohio, and you started it
At the church. So
at the
with
church.
a
Okay,
team, but yeah.
okay. I love the humility, but so we met through that. By the way, I don't know if you noticed this. I am wearing something today for you.
The shirt.
This shirt.
Oh my gosh. Did you tell him the backstory?
No, I have not told anybody. If you're watching, I have a weird. I don't even know where I got it. Probably like H&M or Tom Man or something. What does it say, Tama?
I don't even know how to say that.
Yeah.
Dig it.
And this is
Tama
for
dig
those of
it.
you that have ever wondered, is Russ is weird in person? As Deanna's on podcast, the answer is yes. Because I think you asked me, what does that mean?
Yes.
And what did I say?
I don't remember. It was some elaborate story and like captivated my whole heart. Like this shirt
I know
has
where this is
so
going.
much meaning to
I know
it.
where this is going.
And I was like, are you serious? Like that's amazing. First time meeting him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I find out he made it up on the spot. So like kudos to your storytelling ability. And also I got bamboozled. So yeah.
You know what? I try to major in deceit. They say that's healthy. I'm just
Scary.
kidding. I'm just kidding. But it was fun. And it was me, you, Pastor Steve. So we probably stayed there 9 hours, to be honest. But anyways, that was just like meeting you all, the layers of who you are.
Yeah,
or some of
yeah.
them have just been, well, one of the reasons I want to ask you on is Pastor Tim and I just selfishly, and Kevin as well, just like this year, what interesting people can we bring on and just have interesting conversations?
Yeah.
And, you were on staff at one church. You still serve at one church, you and your family, your husband. But correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm leaving something out of the resume. You're a fashion designer, author.
Fashion consultant.
Fashion
I wish
consultant.
I could design, but I have a fashion consulting business.
So give me the, Instagram, LinkedIn bio. Who is Dionna Carter? What's kind of led you to this moment?
So what's funny is actually I was talking to one of my like best friends today, And he was like, you need to change your Instagram handle because it's fly and shy. And he was like, I don't think you get to call yourself shy anymore. So backstory, everything that I do now is almost diametrically opposed to who I was growing up. I was incredibly shy, like ridiculously shy, up until about I started working in corporate America. So maybe like 20. I'm an introvert by nature, so I refuel just being in my own space and in silence.
So you're still an introvert.
Very much
There's
an
just
introvert,
been
1000%.
Learned extroversion.
Learned how to. Well, I always tease that the world wasn't built for introverts; it was built for extroverts, and you just got to kind of learn how to navigate in that.
Especially America.
1000%. So I've just really learned, and so it's been really cool. I feel like I'm just like a walking, living testimony of God stretching you and growing you beyond what you ever anticipated. And so with that, I mean, I've always been obsessed with fashion. I love fashion. My life goal was to be the editor of Vogue magazine.
I could see it.
Hasn't happened yet. You never know what the future holds. But yeah, journalism was my background. That's what my degree is in. But I've always loved outreach. And so I started working at L Brands. I interned there when I was like 19.
Really?
I was in community relations at L Brands. And that's what really got me into community. I didn't know you could get paid to like serve the community. And I've basically been doing that ever since for longer than I care to admit right now, because you're a lot younger than me, so.
Are you on any of the boards for Columbus Fashion?
I am not. I just know some of the people. My husband's very closely connected to a number of those people, so yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I'm gonna ask you some people afterwards.
I thought it was interesting, like, when I first heard of the Foster gift card outreach. It's just so, like, I don't know how to say it. It meets such a felt need.
Yeah.
And you put a video out on your Instagram. I love the way you put it. Like, a gift card's more than just, a gift card.
Yeah.
It's autonomy for a foster child.
Yep.
And I thought that was so eloquently put. And what was that process like, starting that outreach with the group you started it with at one church, and some of the fruit that you've seen from it?
Oh my gosh. So it started in 2019. We reached out to Franklin County Children's Services. So Pastor Mark, who is Pastor Greg's dad, and was on staff for a while, he is a whole character. He's a hoot. But he had a connection at FCCS. And so we just connected with them and said, we want to serve the community, but we want to have a conversation about what you actually need. I think a lot of times people, well-meaning, will go out and do things and say, hey, we're going to do this and you're going to love it. But you didn't really ask what the need was. And so it's not really, handling what they need support in. And so we asked, so what do you need? And they were saying that a lot of times during Christmas, kids get left out of the mix, teens get left out because everyone wants to give a toy to a little kid.
Yeah.
And I felt convicted because I was taking my little kids at the time to go buy toys for other little kids. I'm like, this is great. They're on your level. And so they were saying, 15-year-olds don't care about Barbies. Like, they don't want a Hot Wheels truck for Christmas. But if they can get a $25 gift card, it gives them autonomy. It helps them feel understood. But then also, they're at Easton. They're out with their friends. Like, hey, let's go to Raising Cane's. Cool, I got this gift card. I can get what I want, and I feel a part of my peer group. And so that's really how it started. The first year was with Franklin County. There were 775 teens, and our goal was to give each of them a $25 gift card. And I remember feeling so stressed. I was like, whoo, that's a big number. Okay, we're going to do this. And we put it out to our church, and we collected almost $55,000 worth of gift cards that first year.
Wow.
We had people who were coming to the church office during the week who said, I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in God, but I love what you're doing with this outreach, and I just want to donate gift cards to it.
It's amazing.
And so we were blown away. Each teen got 3 $25 gift cards, and it's been growing ever since. The next year we expanded to the state. It was 2020. We didn't know what was going to happen. And we collected enough for more than 5,000 teens to get 2 gift cards.
That's crazy.
So it's been so cool. Last year, we crossed our $1 million milestone. This year, we're adding an event to the mix. Like, it's growing, but it's just so cool to see that this is going, it's well beyond the 4 walls of a church. We have partners who are in corporate America. We have partners in different nonprofits. And just seeing that these teens, even hearing the stories, there was a story of a teen who said, I've never had anything new before. And when I got this gift card, I got to go buy something new for myself. Everything she'd ever owned had been handed down to her from someone else. And that's so simple. You know, we buy our kids new things all the time, but you don't think about like what that means to an individual who may be dealing with like trauma that we've never experienced, or just in a situation that she didn't get to choose, but she got to choose what she did with this gift card.
That's amazing.
And so it's just been awesome to like watch it grow, to bring more people into the mix. I have a great team working with me this year. A number of people from the church who really like God laid this on their heart. A couple people who don't even go to the church who said, I just want to support. And so I'm really excited about what this year's going to look like.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What's the fruit been like inside of yourself? Like, what are some things that have surprised you?
That's an amazing question. It's definitely been such a faith builder. I am I'm a recovering perfectionist. I am a type A, like.
What Enneagram were you?
1.
1, yeah.
1000%. I plan everything out to the T. Like, I am that person. And since the very beginning, it's been no, God's going to do this or it's not going to get done. Like I said, I was stressed that first year. Like, I don't know how we're going to get this many gift cards. And he said, cool, I'm going to blow your mind. And every single year I've seen this. I'll give you even like a small example. So this year, I said we're creating an event. And the event is for 15 to 18-year-olds in care. And it's to support them by connecting them to resources so that as they age out of care, they'll have networks around like career exploration and mental health and all of these things. And I said, okay, God, I feel really behind. Like, I feel like I started this late. How are we going to get there? I have to fundraise. The first person I talked to, they said, we love it. We're just going to write you a check for this right now. And it was a substantial check.
That's crazy.
And I said, this is not because I'm just this amazing fundraiser. This is because God's hand has been on this from the very beginning. And so it's not my job to make it happen. It's just my job to be obedient, go where he leads me. And he's doing all the things. So it's been an incredible faith builder.
Oh my gosh.
1000%.
That's wild.
It's like I see the nexus of all these things. Like one, what a perfect example of somebody using their skills. Your people skills, your entrepreneurial skills, something that's actually fueled by compassion. And also, you're one of the most open-handed outreach people I've ever seen because the branding's great. You make it so easy for people. But I remember I felt so at ease whenever we would all meet and you'd be like, yeah, I don't care if you let them know it's us or one church. Like some people use, cheesy language like it's kingdom, but like you really like operate that way. You really don't care.
Yeah.
And you can just feel that spirit in everything you do.
I appreciate that.
So how cool to watch what was once a dream become what it is.
It's such a God thing.
And
it's so cool.
Since we have kind of like an unexpected billboard, anybody that's listening or watching, how can they help? How can they get involved?
One.church/foster.
Okay.
We have all the everything. So we have connections if you have questions, how to give, if you want to give a gift card, if you want to give to support the event. We are still fundraising for the event because it is a heavy lift. It's going to be hosted at COSI. I know a guy who works there.
Yeah. You're talking about your husband?
My husband. He's the director of creative engagement at COSI.
Wow.
And I mean, Dr. B is the CEO, and he's been like a great thought partner, just like giving insights and things. Because, I mean, this is new for me, too.
Yeah.
So it's hosted at COSI. But, we're fundraising to make sure all the costs and everything are covered. And it's a great experience for the kids. So one.church/foster.
Go there.
Yep.
I love it. That's awesome.
crazy.
Yeah.
I feel like that's all I want to talk about, but I know we have so much more we got to get to.
So much more.
I think it's so cool.
One of the reasons I wanted
really
both
do.
you at the table is because I feel like you're both, correct me if I'm wrong, like, would you serial entrepreneurs, kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it hit me right before we began filming. You're both like church transitioning anomalies. That you both like. I feel like y'all should both teach a master course.
Right, exactly.
Both of y'all like. It can be awkward sometimes leaving a job or a church, and we don't have to spend a lot of time here. But I just think kudos to y'all. Y'all both stepped off a staff, and then your families are still planted in church, and you're giving and serving. And I just think when it can work out like that, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that for a second. Did you grow up in church?
I did. My dad's a pastor.
Oh, very cool.
Yep.
So you've seen your share of like church transitions, people leaving.
Oh yeah.
Staff members leaving, staff members getting fired. You've seen it all.
As a kid, I was a little jaded. I'm not gonna lie. It was the introvert in me who was like, kids get the pleasure and like the privilege of thinking and saying and doing things that like adults want to do, but we know it's not socially acceptable.
Yeah.
So as a kid, I didn't really have to talk to a lot of people,
Yep.
so I didn't. And I got to just observe a lot. And there were the great church members who were like, their heart was there and all the things. But then I'm like, for the people who did my parents dirty, those are the ones I'm like, all right, Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let them go. Let them go. But like I had to like observe that growing up. And so because as a PK, you see like the hurt and the things that have happened, my heart has always been like, first I'm going to pray for my pastor, for my leadership, because I know that it's hard. I know intimately what that struggle looks like. And I also know that like this isn't something that people take lightly, at least they shouldn't. And so if you're coming into it with the right heart, even if at a certain point I have to exit because God's calling me out, I want to do it in a healthy way. The church that my husband and I met at, we, stopped going there, but we talked to our pastors before. Like, hey, we feel God is leading us this way. And we still have great relationships at that church, even though we don't go there anymore. You don't have to burn bridges just because God's calling you somewhere else.
Not to interrupt you, but I just want to say what a mature and rare thing that is. That you initiated a conversation before you left.
Yeah. Again,
I just want to
you
highlight
watch
that.
and you learn, you know? And I think it's important too, just as Christians, if we're going to say we're trying to follow the leading of Christ, it's just being honest with ourselves about like, is God leading me or my feelings leading me?
Yeah.
And if it's my feelings, like, okay, how do I bring my feelings under submission to Christ and whatever he actually wants for me? Because I've seen a lot of people who like their feelings have led them away. They haven't had the hard conversations like we talked about before. They haven't dealt with the necessary conflict. Hurt is a thing, but also God said to go address the person who you have fault with. Like, so let's go talk to them. So I'm sure you understand, what that transition looks like.
I think what was surprising to me, and I didn't even leave for anything bad. I felt like God was moving me on. There was no conflict or anything. But I think of all the church transition I've seen, it's become apparent that church becomes this emotional catch-all for people. And for me, too. It's like it's the place where I work through my emotions. And as much as, this church and one church and a really healthy expression of how come as you are and, bring all your problems and bring everything in. I even felt that way when I was on staff. I didn't feel like I had to withhold what was going on. But I think what's hard is when you go through really difficult seasons personally. And this is for everybody, not just if you're a pastor at a church, but just if you're somebody who attends. When you go through something really difficult emotionally or financially or something's going on with your marriage, it's really hard to keep showing up in a place and to be honest about what's going on deep down. So I think that a lot of the unhealthy transitions out of like our church, like people that I know who were in, and they were serving and they were all in and they loved it, made premature exits because of the really real battles they were having personally.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that they lacked the courage to bring it up, but I do know that it does take an abnormal amount of courage to proactively find your people to address those things in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And you're not sure if you can get to the other side of it.
Yeah.
But, I think what's cool is that you absolutely can.
Yeah.
So what advice, I don't know, I'm interested to hear from you guys. Like, I know there's people in every church that we sit in that have thought about leaving, or they don't like this about the church, or that person did something to them, or the pastor said something that they really don't agree with. What advice would you give for people who are kind of struggling with that?
I'll say a couple top of mind things, then let the pros take it. But no, I mean, I've had to leave some pretty painful things, even if it was going from one staff to another staff or whatever. I think the first, like, for me, really important mind frame that I've just fortunately had people drill into me over and over. And at this point, you've probably heard so many people say it sounds cliche, but it's true. The way you leave one season or one place is the way that you enter the next. So even if it's just from a selfish standpoint, I want the blessing of God in my life.
Yeah.
Like, I want the blessing and the favor of God to follow me. And so if nothing else but from a quote-unquote selfish standpoint, I want to make sure I'm prayerful and careful in the way I do that. And that comes down to my spirit. That comes down to that, I can't control other people, but I can control me. It goes down to, Paul, as much as is possible with you, be at peace with all men. I think connected to that is the whole idea. Because there have been places where I knew, and I've talked about this from the platform, where I knew my time was up. And I thought, oh, well, I'll be gone in a month. But I didn't feel released to leave for 3 years. And part of that is I think in general, when possible, you need to be running towards something more than you're running away from something. And so I just think that creates a health.
Yeah.
And then, it's kind of old school. It's kind of even tricky to talk about, especially since one of the roles I'm in is a leader and pastor. But for me, I think as a young kid, I just always the honor aspect of wanting to have the covering and blessing of whoever my spiritual leadership was there. I wanted to go, and I wanted as much as possible to have that right, and for there to be peace there and communication there.
Yeah.
Those are the first few things that pop in my mind. And then I just think, just commit not to badmouth the place that you leave. Just don't. If, when I was youth pastor, I would just tell students, hey, most of the time, and I'm guilty, I'm sure I still break this all the time, but I try to live by it. An issue is either big enough to address or small enough to pray about and forget.
That's good. I like that.
And so I think if something's eating at you to where you're telling other people about it, then Matthew 18, take it to the person.
That's good.
I think if we all practice Matthew 18, the world would be healthy and maybe healed a little bit more.
Here's a thought.
So those are just some top of mind. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, great
the story that I may have told you before, the couple months after I had left, and maybe some people didn't know, or maybe some people that had recently left our church, and we ran into each other in public, they would come up to me and go, how's church going? And everything. Oh, it's great. I actually just, stepped off staff and doing something new. We still go. We still love it. And for some reason, that interaction opens the door for them to just vomit every horrible thing that they think about, every leader, the church, what they did. And obviously I'd, sit there and listen. I said, well, it sounds like you have some things you need to address. But more so it's interesting just to, when you have that freedom to talk with people, how much people are holding in. And like how they're, I don't know how to say it. How if you don't address resentment, if you don't address what Scripture calls little foxes that run through, it's like if you don't if you're not super proactive, and it's not just with churches, with every area of life. I think the hard part about church is you have spiritual ties. These are deep-rooted relationships that almost feel like, friends feel like family. We're brothers and sisters, and you feel that. So it's not like a job that you can, quit and go get another job that does the same thing. It's a completely different environment and a completely different group. But I just thought it was so funny. I don't know if you had that same experience or not.
Yeah, people do share a lot with me. I will say that.
That's a great thing to be aware of. If you're about to leave, people will come find you.
That's so true.
Because the miserable want to commiserate.
Well, and they want to hear, they feel like the party line that you're giving, there has to be more to it. And so I want to get down to what is like the true nitty gritty. And to your point, it's like, not going to diminish whatever you've been through. And I think there's a lot of self-reflection that needs to take place. We're all human at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see someone on the stage and then you elevate them in your mind to like, oh, you should be held to this standard. And yes, we have a, higher responsibility and all of those things. And also we all breathe the same air. Like we are all still human. And so I think it's important for those who do have that hurt to take some time, take it to Jesus. Let's actually pray about it. Let's not just talk about it. We love to talk about things to everyone except Jesus. And instead of letting him speak to us, we just want to spew all of our thoughts. And so I think it's really important to do that introspection and have the humility to say, is there anything in me? Like, God, purify my own heart. And then to your point, I think that was great what you said. If it's big enough and it keeps eating at me, go talk to the people. Because especially what I've learned, just the ones I've worked with on staff, everyone's open.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a facade. It's not a game. I actually truly care.
Right.
And if there's something I did that offended you that I didn't intend, because 9.5 times out of 10, it wasn't intentional.
Right.
Then let's address it, and it doesn't have to be a thing. But then also, like, let's just really lean into whatever God is calling us to. And there are moments that, to your point, where you felt led to leave somewhere and it takes a while, because I think God's working things out in us too.
Yeah.
We can be very just sporadic and impatient.
Yeah.
We're impatient and we don't want to wait for the timing. It's just like, okay, God gave us this. I think about, Joseph. We think about patience, you think about Joseph.
Yeah.
And God gave him this, like, this is where you're headed. The patience it took to get there. And maybe God's saying, like, yes, I'm calling you out of this, but not quite yet, because there are things in you that I want to work out. I think people see church as a place where you should fill all of my needs and you should make me feel comfortable, and I should like everything that happens at church. And I always tell people that, like, I've had very sanctifying experiences within church, because not everything has been my preference.
Yeah.
There have been songs that I don't like. Like, I don't want to sing this song, but I'm going to think about the words because it's still worshiping my Savior. And like, if we go into a space where church should meet all of our preferences, we are way more likely to be offended, to be upset, to be turned off, because it's all about us then.
So true.
And that's not what church is for.
Okay.
No, I was just going to say, when I left, I didn't realize how many maybe culture things I wanted to contribute, that I was working to contribute towards. Like, I was trying to help. We all have things that we want to see.
Yep.
And whether you attend a church or you work at a church, like, there's a part of you that's like, okay, that frustrates me, so I'm going to work in a healthy way to try to bring people along, and maybe I can do my part in starting this ministry or ending that ministry, or getting more money towards that part of the ministry. And when I felt like God had moved me on from the staff part, what was surprising was I had all of this, what felt like unfinished business in the back of my mind that I knew I was walking away from, but I had resentment. I think just general resentment that I didn't make as much progress as I felt like maybe should have been made.
Yeah, that's real.
Good. And I think each one of us, like, I've had very real conversations with you. I've had very real conversations with, all my brothers that were, even my leaders on staff. And so I think what would surprise most people, like, you cannot be afraid to be, like, as honest as you possibly can with your pastors.
Yes.
Yes.
Like, they've probably heard from people directly to their face 10 times worse than anything bad that you would say to them. Like, go to say, it really makes me mad when you do that.
Yeah.
Like, can you explain that to me? Because that rubs me the wrong way, and I feel like it's wrong.
Yeah.
And if I think that one of the most helpful things for me in that whole time was the honest conversations that were done in love. I knew you guys loved me, and hopefully you guys knew, maybe you hoped that I still loved you, but I have so much admiration for everybody. And what happens when you deal with those things, it's like almost those conversations are fertilizer for what can happen in the soil the next couple years that you couldn't even imagine. So
That's so good. If you're in a healthy place, there should be an openness for those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And I know every leader is different, but you probably heard me say this before. I told somebody, this is a person on staff, I told somebody the other day, I said, I am to the extreme of, even though I wouldn't prefer it, you could probably cuss me out in my office every single day and I wouldn't fire you. But if I have to wonder what you're thinking and hear their stuff, like water fountain talk, you'll see fire in my eyes.
That's a good point. I like that.
I feel like I can take a weird amount if you just say it to me in private, to my face directly. But it's it's that I just And I feel like most leaders, if they're healthy, somewhat secure, they're like that. It's like I think healing conversations happen in those conversations. And then one other thing, because when you mentioned like self-reflection, David, examine me, know my. And you're talking about how there's so much stuff that I think you said we stuffed in, so much emotion under the surface. It reminded me, I was listening. It was like 2 days ago to Carey Nieuwhof started a series on his podcast going up into the election. And Andy Stanley was on it talking about how do you lead through all the craziness. And they kind of took a few minutes going back to 2020 and all the turmoil and people leaving. And Andy Stanley said something that simple, but I thought was profound. He said, what I found, because Andy Stanley, he would surprise people. If he'd hear there's an issue, he'd call them. Let's just talk. There were literal small groups that he was so offended, and he would shock them and say, hey, I'm just going to show up. Is that okay? And then like once he had conversations with him, he's like, he said, when Jesus washed his disciples' feet, what was healing is there's proximity. There's closeness. And it's hard to stay offended if there's closeness.
Which, just for people that aren't familiar, he's the pastor of an 80,000
right.
person church.
Yes.
Massive,
Right.
yes.
Massive mega church.
Yeah.
But he made a statement. He said, what I found he said, we had, 3-generation families, grandparents, parents, kids, all attending that left en masse, so much hurt, sobbing. He said, but what I found out every single time is that the presenting issue was never the issue.
Yeah.
So, for instance, one of those guys, one of the families, he kept asking questions. And finally, halfway through it, he goes, hey, I have an observation, if you don't mind me sharing. I think the real reason you're angry at me is I've embarrassed you. I've embarrassed you because you're having to explain the church you love so much to all your friends. And he said, and I just want to apologize for that because it's obvious I've embarrassed you. And I just think there's power within ourselves and for leaders, for everybody involved to say, okay, what are here's the presenting issue. What maybe for me as a leader, even that gives me empathy when I can see past what's annoying and be like, oh, okay, that's probably connected to this. And here's what you're probably really feeling.
That's a good point.
You know?
Yeah. One of my favorite, and I think that's profound in a lot of ways, specifically what you said about how the presenting issue isn't the core issue. And, you know, in the most unhealthy seasons of church life I've been a part of, you can almost feel that, feel that people have maybe some issues that could be worked through, but they're hyper aware of the straw that'll break the camel's back and that'll give them the permission to leave.
Yeah.
Which is just unfortunate. Church life for me is new. Like I got saved when I was 19. I think I started working at the church when I was 20. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I grew up Catholic, like completely different thing here. But, what has been I now have been in it long enough to see people who've worked through a tough season. And there's absolutely a fruit and a connectedness with other members of the church. There's a joy and an ownership when we see, like this past weekend, and we had a jam-packed building for 2 services, jam-packed. And last week we had a jam-packed building even more for 2 services. And I take we were here when we raised money for this building, we were here when we had to raise money again for this building because the things changed and it got delayed and we needed more money and the church stepped up and now we get to walk in the fruit of that. And every time we do, it's almost like you almost make eye contact with, the OGs, and you're like, remember? Yeah, we were there, we remember that.
I love that.
This is so good.
I know, right?
Okay, I do want a hard right turn though.
Okay.
So when did you start feeling or become aware of a lot of your creative inclinations? What all have you done? What all are you doing? Specifically, tell me about, hold on a sec, Bed of Thorns.
Bed of Roses.
Bed of Roses.
Thorns included. Yes,
Okay.
Very much so. So wrote a book of poetry. When did I become aware? So what's funny is, and this tracks with just who I've been growing up. So I have always written, journaled, all of that. That's been my whole thing. Especially, being an introvert, not wanting to speak to a lot of people. That's how I got my thoughts out. I'm not an external processor. That's how I got my thoughts out, my feelings, all the things. And so when it came time to go to college, I wasn't the person I don't know what I'm going to do. I was like, I can do exactly one thing. I can write. So journalism it is. But poetry has always been a thing for me. It kind of is like a free space. So I am someone a natural rule follower in a lot of respects, but poetry is it's subjective. So there really is no rule to it. And so went to school for journalism, but what's interesting is God is so funny. I always tease that I'm very much like Gideon. I've been going back a lot to his story, but Gideon, the person who God tells you something very clearly, and Gideon's like, cool, can I get a sign? And God gives him a sign. He's like, okay, but can I get one more sign?
Yeah.
That is me. Like, God will tell you something, and then I'm like, okay, God, and can I just get a few more confirmations? Like, this is it. And so that's kind of been like my journey, even creatively, with God trying to expand and push me out, and saying like, nope, you're going to do this thing. So with my book in particular.
When did it come out?
It came out in 2021.
2021. Wait, what month?
February.
Okay. Where can people find it? Amazon?
Actually, it's on my website.
Okay.
DionnaCarter.com.
With an I.
DIONNA Carter.com. But with this book in particular, it is really written to women. And it was written during a very difficult season in my own marriage. And what's funny is I'm very much God and I have always had like our closet quiet time. And this season I lived in my closet a lot, needed a lot of Jesus. And so I would just journal and like write this poetry just because this was my way of expressing. And God was leading me to share this. And I was like, heck no, like, no, I don't share my poetry. This is just for me and you, God, like that's it. And I kept feeling pressed. And it was also so vulnerable because, like, who just loves to talk about the struggles that you have in marriage? Cool, great. And so I remember sharing it with my husband, like, I feel like God's leading me this. And I don't share with him until it's like, okay, I'm done fighting, because he's the one who's going to be like, okay, we're doing it. Yeah. He is such an action-oriented, like, let's move. And I'm like, well, we got to make sure all the ducks are in a row. And does this make sense? And how's it going to? He's like, no, we don't have to figure that out. We're just going to do it. And so I was like, okay, God, if you want me to do this, you have to line up all these pieces. I've never written a book. I've never wanted to write a book. And he lined up all the pieces, like down to I happened to be part of some program and they happened to say like, hey, we have these like editors who are willing to mentor you. I ended up working with this woman in the UK who's with this big publishing house, and she like edited this book for me and gave me feedback, all free of charge.
Wow.
Like
That's
all of these things, a big deal. And so then it was my husband, he's in all the creative spaces. He said, oh, I know this person and she can do great design, and she designed it. And all the pieces just came together in a way that was like, okay, guy, like if I don't do it, it's just me just purely saying no. Like I will not do it. And so I did it. I put it out. I was like, okay, God, we did it. He was like, cool. Now I want you to talk about it. And I was like, what? Okay. So I ended up actually speaking at 514. So they had a women's night, Rooted. They do consistently every year. Spoke there, and I think it was like 500 women in there. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. What is happening? But then seeing the fruit of it, because it is all about the fruit. It's not about me and what I don't want to do. But so many women who have been like, I understand, but also thank you for sharing, because I've been there. I've cried out in my closet, too scared, too ashamed, too whatever, to get this out, to talk to anyone. And you articulated what I was feeling. Now, what's funny is on the Converse, God bless my pastor, I'm going to call him out. So he and his wife read the book, and she absolutely connected, understood. He was like, you write so well. I didn't know what you were talking about. I didn't really understand it, but Shaylin totally vibed with it. And I was like, that's fine though, because it was written for women. Because I'm sure my husband was like, I love the words that you put together. Cool.
They rhyme. That's good.
They don't even rhyme, actually. He was like, ah. So it very much was for women. But again, like God has just really been showing me, there is this scripture in Exodus, and it's a very small one, but it struck me a few years ago. And it was basically talking about how God was bringing together people to build the temple and all the things. And it was saying that God had put like the crafts people and the ones who did who could make things out of wood. But then he also was talking about how like the clothing and what was in the clothing. And what struck me is it's so easy to look at creativity and think that it's real superficial. But there are so many pieces of it that God uses Because God's creative. He is the ultimate creator.
Yeah.
We're made in his image. And then he uses this creativity to draw people in all of these different ways. So with me and my writing, or like even my fashion consulting, has become ministry in the sense that I'm giving women the self-esteem that they've been looking for. It's not about you got cute clothes, but it's about like, what is this making you feel like? And how do I embrace the woman that God created me to be? And it's all of these pieces of creativity that come together for God to truly like to do ministry through. And so that's really what it's been for me.
Have you ever heard of Bezalel?
Yes, love him.
Bezalel,
Yes.
the person that probably...
He was the guy who I was like really digging into. Yes.
Was that the verse?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so Bezalel, a
Yes.
well-known Bible hero.
I'm excited to hear about him.
He was the first person in Scripture we ever have a record of being filled with God's Spirit and anointed.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an artisan.
Yep.
He was anointed
Yes.
to work creativity.
Yes. That was the guy. My husband and I go back and forth like every few months, like, how do you say this dude's name? So I'm glad that you said it out loud.
Yeah.
Yep, him.
Just to be honest, I could have butchered it.
Well, none of us know, so we'll go with it.
Is that what that says on your shirt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ding, ding,
I
ding.
got it. I got it. I think what seems interesting from the little I've tried to put together about you is you're a very driven person, very organized. Like you said, rule follower, introverted. And so it seems like it would be out of character for you to take creative risk like this. So those two things, I know they're not at odds within you. It's something that came from within you and that God's given you to share. So what's the relationship like between the creative risks you take and I say it this way because I saw a video that you did about a season where you were struggling, and the phrase you used was, I don't feel like I'm as productive as I should be for God. And I feel like a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
Like I know God loves me. I just don't feel like I'm returning the favor. So of all the things you produce, of all the things you're all the risks creatively that you're taking, how does that all work together?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you have the best questions.
Thank you.
No, I'm
really
serious.
does.
Like, that is a gift. That is phenomenal. I want to learn from you. I'm being very serious. I think.
I asked how you were doing.
Great question. My 6-year-old would love to learn from you. That's hilarious.
No, Kevin is the greatest
Like,
conversationalist.
literally.
You guys are trying to
question
deflect from answering the
No,
question,
this
so
is
I'm just
a
kidding. I
gift.
appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. I think it's so funny. God, I keep saying I need to take like the word random out of my vocabulary because there's nothing random with God, even though everything sometimes, because I can't see it all, it feels random. But I feel like he has consistently had me on this journey of learning what it looks like to just rest in him and trust him. I'm a control freak by nature. My husband will attest to it. I like things to be in order and very specific and all of those things. And that doesn't jive well with being a disciple of Jesus because you actually got to give up control. And so with all of these creative risks, they have always come on the other side of me giving up control and saying like, okay, God, I am finally willing to let you do whatever it is that you're going to do. But even with productivity, with my nature and like I grew up in church, I very much have always had a foundation. Like I wasn't the PK who like was like wilding out. I actually truly had a relationship with God very, very early on. But in my nature, it's easy for me to kind of like go into legalism, to go into condemnation. Like that comes very naturally to me.
Towards others or yourself?
For myself,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm my harshest critic beyond what anyone ever could be. But I've had to learn, what does it look like to truly rest in God's grace? And to realize that it's not because of me, really it's in spite of me that God chooses to use me. But when I think about productivity, I think for myself and a lot of other people, we get caught up in, I know that salvation is free, but I know it's free, but I got to prove, but I have to do, and I need to help God, and I need to show him. And scripture's like, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. In Ephesians, where it talks about we were lost in this world without God, without hope. Like, we literally had nothing to bring to the table. I think about my kids, who I like have told them a couple times when they try to like pop off, you actually don't bring any, like, I love you. You don't give me any, like, you don't pay a bill. You barely clean. Like,
you yell at me.
You're not. What are you doing productive?
Yeah.
But I love you anyway. I would give my life for you anyway. And that's how God looks at us. Like, I don't need you, but I love you and I want to be able to work through you. And so I've had to learn that it really is about just complete surrender. And complete surrender is not a one-time thing. It's a daily thing. It's a moment-by-moment thing. And with the productivity piece, I have truly learned to even reframe what is productive. Because some days productivity looks like I crushed my whole task list of all the things to do for the outreach and all the stuff. Sometimes productivity is I sat with my kids and we talked about this scripture, or maybe like I cut off everything and hung out with my husband and gave him my focus. And that's productive. Like, that is what I needed to do in that moment. And so reframing what that looks like is also very, very liberating. My counselor would be so proud of me right now. But it's very liberating because it's like, I don't have to, my faith does not come through works, but my works come because of my faith.
Yes.
Great, yeah.
And so that's been a constant thing that I'm learning and relearning in all of these endeavors. And every time I think like, okay, check that one off, God's like, here's one more. We're going to go on this journey again. And I'm like, okay. And like, I think the last probably 5 years, it's been a consistent thing after thing. But then also he's been blowing my mind with everything that he's doing when I constantly just surrender that to him. And so I would love to encourage people, like, what we don't realize is when we look at our productivity, it's very self-focused. And so for me, I've had to keep learning, keep putting my eyes on Jesus. If I look at me, I see all of my limitations. I see all of my failures, all of my struggles. But when I look at Jesus, I'm like, you are literally the one who gave me faith.
Yeah.
I didn't come into faith because I just felt like it. He gave me faith. He's the one who gives us gifts freely. Every good and perfect gift comes from him. All of these things. I just have to shift my focus to things above and not on earthly things.
I think, and you said something that I want to dive into a little bit with both of you, because I feel like I am probably more like your husband. What Enneagram is he? Do you know?
3.
Okay. So he's more like you. But, you know, I think that I come from things very disorganized. I'm like painfully big picture. I view life more in patterns, not to-do lists. I take detours, to get things. I have to remind myself to even look at a to-do list after I write it out. I say that to say I have a problem with something you said, and I want to talk about it.
Go for it.
You said that we were talking. Okay, how do I say this? You said that you have to give up control in order for God to use you. Did I?
It feels accurate. We can run back the tape, but yeah, it feels accurate.
How about this? You said that you can't be controlling, okay, and have God use you at the same time. When, for me, I don't think that you're as controlling as you think you are, because that whole conversation of maybe what's great about you is also what's worst about you, right? That there's two sides to the same coin. Because I look at you and I admire the fact that you're a great steward, it seems, and that you steward the tasks and the dreams that God gives you very well, because you're probably a more controlling personality, right? And so, I don't know. I feel like you're a similar way, Russ. I think that you're very driven. You have a lot of things mapped out, planned out. And how do you manage both sides of that coin? Your controlling, driven nature, and how that also helps you steward the things that God puts in front of you.
Your turn.
Oh, man. Well, I probably fail at it often. feel like so much of the key to not just productivity but peace is taking ownership of what's in my control and trusting what isn't. And I feel like most of our recipes for anxiety is we flip it.
That's good.
And because there's also, maybe this is an interesting nuance to play out, is the difference between control and ownership. Because sometimes Christians get very superstitious with their faith and they don't take any ownership and say, well, God will do it. And if it's his will, it'll happen. Que sera, sera. You know? But then, like, the things that I have absolutely no control over, I'll stew and ruminate until stress turns to anxiety and then depression, then despair.
Yeah.
You know? So I think for me, I'm in a season right now where I have several things going on that are kind of stressful and overwhelming. But can I say it this way? It feels like privileged stress.
Yeah.
Like, to keep my perspective in check, I don't know if y'all deal with this, but I have this kind of tug of war in my mind right now of like, okay, God, I want to be honest when I'm stressed, but also, thank you, I get to be stressed about this.
That's spot on.
Thank you that I get the privilege. I was talking to somebody the other night at North Star. They're talking about burnout, and I'm like, I really, the longer I live, believe that burnout doesn't come from doing too much. It does come from doing too much of what you're not created to do.
Wow.
And when you are in your sweet spot of doing what you're created to do, it's self-replenishing.
Wow.
You still have to guard. Like, I had my first real Sabbath this Saturday that I've had in weeks, and oh my gosh, it was healing to my soul. But I think, was it somebody said that Jesus didn't live with balance, he lived skewed. And so I'm still learning. I'm failing all the time. What does it look like to live skewed but healthy? What does it look like to give myself permission we had this conversation, to be obsessive in this season?
Yeah.
To be obsessive and have fire in my eyes and unapologetic about it. But to be healthy by also still prioritizing life-giving community. And by not just flipping through pages in my devotionals like I've done the last few mornings. And to actually be honest about the things going on in my soul. And to not start skipping workouts like I'm starting to do. Like, what does it look like to, like, be obsessive and be skewed unapologetically, but take ownership of the things that I need to and keep the to stay healthy. I think you need that mix of healthy community, connection to God that's rich and not just routine.
I just got really convicted because
I don't even know if that answered your question.
Absolutely.
No, that was so good.
That was great. But I literally got goosebumps when you said these are the thought that came to mind was like, when was the last time that I thanked God for the problems that I prayed for?
Yeah.
And it's like,
wow.
with my kids, like, it's hard to raise kids. It's hard to be married. It's hard to, but I prayed for those kids, you know?
Yeah.
And I prayed that they'd be healthy, and I prayed that they'd be vibrant, and I prayed that they'd be, make mistakes. And I prayed that God would give me grace to handle certain moments. And I prayed that I'd be married for, like going on our 9th or 10th year, whatever we are. Andrew, I'm sorry, but I'm sure it's in there somewhere. But you know what I mean? Like, I prayed to have a business. I prayed to have big money conversations. That's what I prayed for.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, like, when was the last time? That's very convicting to me.
So good. I have nothing to add. That was so good.
How interesting, though.
Oh my gosh.
That following God's not like the absence of problems at all. And that's obviously a really elementary thought. We all know that. And then you follow God, you have problems. But how can I get more into the problems, right, that are aligned with how God's made me?
Yeah.
Put me in position, God, to solve problems that you made me to solve.
Yep.
And, so I look at how different you and I probably are from, if you looked at our work desks, they'd probably look very different, okay?
We should get
I mean,
Imagine.
they're probably extremely different, but God made me to solve certain problems, and God made you to solve certain problems.
1,000%.
And they're not better or worse or different. I mean, they are different, but God doesn't love us anymore. God doesn't love us any less. That's funny because we fight that a lot. I think it's so easy. We don't talk about it a lot, even in church, to compare. Like, that person seems like they're doing so much for God. Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Like, I want God to use me like in the way that they use them.
Yep.
He is.
Yeah.
He is. It just doesn't look the same.
Yeah. It's the whole, rock stars want to be movie stars want to be rock stars.
Exactly.
And it all looks different. And I have a question I have to ask you.
Okay.
Well, a couple before we land. One, the personality thing. I think this is interesting. Because I say this tongue in cheek. My first thought when you say that you're not naturally an extrovert is I don't believe you.
No one ever does.
But how? One of the things I like to say is there's a difference between the spirit you have and the personality you choose, or the personality you have and the spirit that you choose.
Got you.
Like attitude.
I like that.
And so, like, how do you?
Ooh,
Because
I like
I
that.
think a lot of us at times use personality as a crutch or an excuse.
I've been guilty. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for you, because it is really interesting when you watch, even especially a lot of creatives or just incredible communicators, incredible designers that actually are really introverted. Actually, that's a pretty common thing.
Yep.
But for you talking about there's some people skills or maybe some extroversion you had to learn. What did that process look like of, okay, I'm going to be true to myself and not look at this as a compromise to grow this or grow that. And I don't know. And if there's anybody watching that's like, oh, I feel that. Like, I feel that tension. I don't know. What would you say?
I will say a lot of this came from being pushed out of my comfort zone. When I started working at L Brands, I had a manager there who did that. I made it very clear. I'm real good on like let's just be upfront, you know?
Yeah.
I don't want to talk in front of anyone. Thank you. I will do all the behind the scenes work. It will be great. I don't need to speak. And she did not let me rest in that. She's like, nope, you're going to do this. Because also you're leading this whole project. And what do you mean you're not going to speak? You're leading the project.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the beginning of my journey and like being pushed out. And then God put me with this husband who does not believe in comfort. Not even a little bit.
What a horrible gift.
Oh, my day. I was like, he knew what he was doing. Cool. And so he's another one who's just like, no, we are going to put you out if you feel like God is leading you in this. And so I think for me, it's been having to, again, surrender and say, okay, God, if this is the direction you're leading me in, we're going to try it. One thing I've like wrestled with, I've talked to my pastor about is like, can you be gifted in something that like you never thought you were good at? I never considered myself a speaker. The irony my husband loves to point out, the high school superlatives in my high school, I got voted most likely to be famous, which I honestly was like, y'all are trying to be funny because there were people in high school who thought I was stuck up because I didn't talk. And they were like, oh, she thinks she's better. No, I'm shy and I'm not speaking because I'd rather just not talk. And so I think there's been things that other people have seen in me that I never would have seen in myself. And so it's just been like, okay, if this is where God is leading me, then I have to grow in it. And so thankfully I've been surrounded. I mean, Pastor Greg is a phenomenal speaker. My husband is top tier. Like, he just won an Emmy. I just had to put that out there. So we have an Emmy at home. We have an Emmy.
Oh, come on.
So, like, he's phenomenal. My dad has always been an amazing speaker. I have a twin brother who, like, we just knew he was going to be the mayor of whatever because he's a great speaker. I saw it on everybody else. I was like, right family, wrong person. But God's like, no. And so it's just been learning that as I lean into it, God keeps giving me the spaces where I can grow into it. But also it's just like not limiting God. I've done a lot of that in my life without even realizing it. We box God in based on who we think we are. And he's like, well, I created you. So actually, I know who you are. And if you would just give me all of you, I can show you exactly who you are. And so I don't feel like I've had to change my personality. Like my personality is still the same, but I've had to step out of my comfort zone to fully embrace who God called me to be.
I love that.
That's fascinating
so good.
because it seems like, you know, the every extroverted thing that you're now doing, you felt was a deficit and a detriment to you when you were younger.
1,000%. 1,000.
But I feel like that's probably a theme for everyone who's high functioning and who high functioning and elite at anything is like you go and you talk to, why does Kobe Bryant, when he was playing, like, why did he stay late after games and shoot, 1,000 free throws or whatever he did? You know, why? In my mind, it's like it almost reveals, yes, an edge and a toughness, but an insecurity. And I feel that.
Yeah.
And it's almost like people will come up and they'll compliment you on certain things. If you had any clue, like how I feel, when I do this, you like, like people will say, one of the things I get to lead worship here, and like has always been one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever done. And so when people come up and say, "Oh,
just like
I'm
that.
like auto-tune, man. That's what they do. It's auto-tune. It's not me. I'm scared to death, but they can correct that. But I still feel that insecurity every single time. But the reps and like. It's amazing when you just say yes to what God puts in front of you. You just say yes, and you learn, and God will surprise you. Because what you thought was a detriment is actually, is there a D word I can put in there? And what you thought was a detriment, is something that God wants to show you that He can use you in.
Absolutely.
My sometimes my mind works in, okay, because these are just such casual convos. But you said three things. Sometimes for the people that listen, they're like, I want takeaways. Like three things I heard you say in that transition of like, okay, here's who I am. Here's what God's calling me to be, to become, to do. Openness. That you're like, I'm going to be true to myself, but I'm not holding with a closed fist my own limited version of my identity.
Yeah.
God, you created me. I'm open with an open hand. Second thing was calling. It's only calling that actually pulls you past what you think you are and what you think you can do. And then a step in that calling is courage.
Yep.
Just say, I'm willing to get uncomfortable. That there's nothing beautiful is ever found in the comfort zone.
True story.
I have a last selfish question. Because last week we began a conversation around confidence. This is probably a big question. Relationship between confidence and creativity.
Relationship between confidence and creativity.
They both start with C?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
The end.
They're supposedly good.
I read about this guy in the Bible. His name was Belial. And he was talking about confidence and courage, and I'm kidding. I'm just buying you time, That's all
Appreciate
I'm doing.
it.
Yeah.
I think.
That's a big T.
Oh my goodness. Confidence and creativity.
Kevin, rephrase it into a brilliant question.
So, it's like ChatGPT. Go ahead and plug in my prompt, spit it out.
So if I were to reach deep into your soul, would you say?
I think, yes, there's absolutely a relationship. I think that, at least I'll speak for me personally, my confidence in certain aspects of creativity, it looks different. So creativity around like fashion, I'm like, that's nothing for me. And that's about the only thing in my life that I probably will say that about. Like, that's nothing for me. Because, like, it's in my blood.
Yeah.
Creativity.
You're always
so
cool.
People say that you and I really have a similar fashion.
Clearly,
Yeah.
I see it. Other aspects of creativity, I'm not always as confident. But I've learned that as I said before, shift my focus. When I shift it off myself, my confidence increases, and then I can be more creative.
That's good.
And so, for instance, my family, we do like weekly scriptures we're memorizing. And so a recent scripture that we've been memorizing in Psalms is it talks about that God is within me. I will not be shaken, for He is right beside me. And so I have been quoting that as my mantra when I go into certain spaces, because I'm like, I really picture that not only is the Holy Spirit within me, but like God is really everywhere that I'm going.
Yeah.
And so I can be completely confident. So as I'm being creative in these other spaces, this is not coming from me. This is not for my own gain. This is for whatever God wants to do. That increases my confidence. My creativity gets so much better.
Wow.
That's good. Can I answer a question too?
Please.
Because I feel like where both of you are confident in creativity is that you will put something out that you know is not perfect to your standards.
Yeah.
And that creativity is the allowing of people to enjoy, observe, interact with your imperfect work.
I think another thing, what I thought you were going to say too, that I think maybe we're kindred spirits on is I heard you say that once you've created it, it was also a push to your comfort zone to actually tell people about it.
1000%. Yes.
He's always, in my face about that.
Such a good friend.
True. Why'd you even write the book?
Sounds like my husband.
Why'd you even write it? I'm not going to tell anybody
Because
about
God
it.
told me to write it. He didn't say release it. He just said write it.
Right.
Done.
That's the fun part.
What I
That
tell
was
you the
the
other
simple
day,
part.
I was like, well, you spent all that time writing the book. You might as well sell it and make money from it.
Might as well.
You know?
Isn't that sinful?
I'm the worst when it comes out. Like, oh.
You know what you're doing,
Yeah.
though. We all need that person in our lives.
Yeah,
That's
that's
legit.
great.
Yeah.
I'm like at the wigwam with him, and afterwards I'm like, the universe needs every word I've ever written. Hey, do you want to invest in something that's going to change the world? And then that lasts for like 20 minutes. Then I get along, and then I get to talk to somebody that I'm about to ask them to invest. I'm like, I just want to see how you're doing. Bye.
That's all, thanks.
I don't even know why I called this meeting.
Yeah.
Legit.
So thank you. Thank God for the Kevin.
Oh
and
my
Russ
God.
You know,
Clap
this has
it
been
up
really
for
good for me,
you.
this podcast, my self-esteem.
You need to record that just plays. You're going to bed
do.
at night.
I mean, literally, I want to get in your brain so I can ask questions like you. I'm not kidding. I'm going to go back and just
Appreciate it.
rewatch it for you.
Well,
like, how did he come up with that question?
Well, then just another shout out. Kevin Illich has his own podcast.
Stop. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's very imperfect,
Oh
but
my
we have
gosh.
so many. I think this way, like, one thing that I love more and more is how different God makes everybody. Like, it's what an adventure to learn about people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the gift we have is like, I can like learn from you and what you're good at and the skills God's given you, and learn from you and what you're good at and the things that God's put in your life. And if I'm just around you,
Yeah.
if I just get some osmosis and just
Yeah.
get a little bit of like what you're excited about into my veins, and I just want to, because we need that.
Yeah.
And I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. And I think this has been a great conversation.
It has been.
This has been so fun. You got to come
Fuel
back.
me. I would love to. This has been fun, but you have to come back if I'm coming.
I'll be here.
Okay.
I'll be here.
That's not like a compliment, kind of an insult. We're gonna get back, and we got to get your husband on here too.
1000%.
That's gonna be
Absolutely.
amazing.
It would be a lot of fun. He would be great.
We'll do it. PT's gonna watch this, be jealous.
Yeah, he should be. Where is he right now?
Who knows? I think
knows?
Florida or Haiti, one of the two.
Florida or Haiti.
Either
Cool.
on a mission
I think
trip
it's
or on vacation. No, I'm kidding. We love you, Pastor Tim.
Any parting words?
I'm just happy to be here. I'm grateful that y'all are creating space for these fun conversations. I think it's just cool that people can see that Christianity is not this like staunch and limiting type of, relationship. But it's exploratory, and it's, we're learning and we're growing and we're, talking and having fun. Like,
That's right.
being a Christ follower can be fun. It doesn't have to be miserable. So, yeah, I'm just grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
For anybody that wants to get in touch with you or contact or just hear about what you're doing,
Yeah.
DionnaCarter.com.
Yep, it's probably the easiest. Everything
okay.
is there. My social, contact, book, all the things.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
love it. Check out her work. Buy her book.
Sure.
So into, you mean, of course, you need to.
Of course, it'll change your life. Maybe more for women, not for men.
Yeah, we go. You should really raise the price on the book, by the way. No, I'm kidding.
We're good. We're good.
And then one.church/Foster.
Yes, one spelled out. one.church/Foster.
And you can sow into an incredible cause going on across the state.
Yes,
so
yes.
Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
And the greatest question asker of all
The greatest.
time.
I'm blushing.
I'm
And,
serious.
man, and you look good.
Just load it on, you know?
Oh my gosh.
So until next time, you'll hear all of our ways to contact us in the outro. But thanks so much for always joining these conversations. Share it with somebody if it was helpful, informative, or provocative. And until next time, we will see you next week.
Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.